Life in the cage was tough, so maybe I was the lucky one in the end. They had taken me here when I was too young to remember anything else, and so this place was the only thing I knew, and I had adapted to it and learned how to survive. Once, I had overheard the staff talking about how minimal the chances were for newcomers to survive here, and it didn't surprise me. I'd seen what happened to them when the Snatchers broke through in the night and got their hands on one of them. Of course, everyone knew that the cage technology that was supposed to protect us wasn't perfect. But to be honest, it didn't have to be. You just had to make sure that you were more shielded than the other children, and then you would be fine. After all, the staff drilled the rules that would keep us safe every day, and I was the living proof that they worked, having spent 14 years of my life here and doing just fine. Those children should have just followed them too, I thought. But a part of me was happy they hadn't, because I had survived because of it. Sometimes I wonder if the staff knew how it really was to be an orphan here. But if they did, I'd never heard them speak about it. I guess it wasn't the type of conversation you wanted to have with someone in your lunch break, and I never wanted to risk my relationship with them by asking uncomfortable questions. So instead, I pretended that the institute was the safe orphanage they all wanted it to be. Most of the staff was okay, and some even truly cared about us, but those I tried to keep at a distance. They never lasted in the job for long, and forming a bond with someone who may leave you one day was an extremely dangerous thing to do here. That's why the pacts the other children made with each other was such a stupid idea. Sure, I guess it was nice to have someone to care for you, and it kept you safe for as long as it lasted. But when those pacts crashed, and they almost always did, they left you lonely and hurt, and the Snatchers were ready to feed on you. You rarely survived the night after such a breakup, no matter if you followed the rules or not. Being alone was much safer, and I got used to it, finding pride in holding my destiny in my own hands. I'd heard commotion in the corridor that morning, so in my lunch break, I decided to investigate it. I had learned a long time ago that there was no such thing as knowing too much in the cage. Although, the information sometimes had a price, and some findings would keep you up at night. Even if this steer was just a new arrival, looking at them gave you a good chance to see what they were about. Some newcomers brought fancy stuff to buy the protection they thought they would need here in the cage. And more often than not, some older kid was willing to trade it. It was a pretty smart move, even if the cage was safe and your only worry was the Snatchers. Having peace of mind by getting protection from an old timer could help you survive the first few nights here, when you were the most vulnerable. After all, it was your fears and worries that were your worst enemies at the cage. I rarely made such deals, but you never knew what those children had to trade. So I walked over to the staff area and then headed towards the waiting rooms when Scruffy said, "You shouldn't go there, Monica." I frowned and pulled out a comfort bear from my bag and gave him a mean look. "If you're not quiet, I will drop you into the bath, and you won't be able to protect me any longer. Remember, you're not waterproof, Scruffy," I whispered. His eyes dimmed, and he said softly, "I'm sorry, Monica. I love you." He's so annoying, I thought. At least he was an older model, and his AI version was pretty basic and easy to fool. That was the main reason I never wanted to replace him, telling everyone that he had been my friend ever since I came here. Which I guess was true. At least the part about me having him ever since I could remember. I have no clue who came up with the idea that a traumatized child would want a speaking teddy bear as their friend. It was definitely not me, but it had caught on, and now all the children here had one. He was just an annoying, speaking computer. But I had learned long ago that if I was caught doing something I shouldn't, he was good to have around. The staff would believe whatever lies I told them, assuming that my comfort bear would never let me do anything bad without raising an alarm and bringing an adult to my rescue. I had arrived at the waiting rooms, and I peeked through the window and caught a glimpse of a girl sitting on the sofa, surrounded by the staff. My heart froze for a moment, and it took all my willpower to control myself. I knew that girl, even if we had never met. I took a deep breath and pushed away what I felt. Luckily, I was so good at it that not even Scruffy detected my distress. I smiled and peeked again, this time bracing myself for what I would see in that room. It didn't look good. Normally, there was never much fuss about new admissions, but now I noticed Dr. Osaki standing in the corner and checking something on his pad as he spoke to the headmaster. He was the head technician, responsible for the cage technology, so he was rarely called to evaluate the newcomer. It was not a good sign, I thought. If he was here, they must consider taking her to the safe room. I sighed. Some knowledge really did come with a price, but in this case, it was worth paying. If she really was in such a bad state, they should have kept her sedated in the hospital, I thought. Not brought her here and put everyone at risk by letting her attract every single snatcher with her hurt and sadness. The cage could keep us safe, but it didn't hide us from them. They would come and try to break through, I knew. And for what? The moment the girl left the safe room, the snatchers would get her. And there was a limit to how long she could be there without turning into a vegetable by the engine running at full capacity. In the meantime, the snatchers would get someone else. I was sure of it. I turned away and almost bumped into Mrs. Avery, one of our carers. She looked as surprised as I was, and it took her a few moments to compose herself. I was faster, so I seized the initiative and said with a sad voice, "It's Scruffy. He was a bit slow this morning. Could you check on him? He's getting old." I sniveled. She looked at me and tried to smile, but I could see the worry on her face when she said, "Oh, of course, Monica. Could you come later to the staff room, and we will have a look at him?" Her voice was shaky. She wasn't very good at controlling her emotions, and I guess she wouldn't last much longer working here. Not after what would happen soon, anyway. "I'm sure he's fine," she added as she passed me, walking towards the waiting room.